Be the Talk, episode 285, featuring Justin Douglas. Welcome to Be the Talk. We go behind the talk 7 days a week for tips and techniques to help you change the world. I'm Nathan Eckel, and a talker myself. I'm interviewing others who change the world with their talk. You can too, even if you've never given a talk before. Let's get started with today's show. We are live with Justin Douglas. Justin, are you ready to talk?
I am.
Justin Douglas is the lead pastor at the Bridge Church. He's the husband and father of three. He is a husband and father of three. I'll say that differently. He loves CrossFit, as you can see from his social media profiles, and he loves to listen to, write, and record music. And he's a happy man today because he is a fan of the Red Sox as well as the Packers. Justin, yeah, welcome to the talk.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
So your talk is called Beyond Boundaries, the Bounded Set and the Centered Set. And, you know, a lot of people don't necessarily know this. I interview all kinds of people on Be the Talk. And I think the last time that I had an evangelical pastor or non-traditional yet Orthodox pastor on was about a year ago when I was starting the talk. And, I grew up in the church myself, and I love your talk. Again, it's called Beyond Boundaries, Bounded Set and Centered Set. And the reason I love it is because you really put a different spin. And, a lot of times we're like, do you believe this? And do you act this way? Or do you do X, Y, and Z? And if you do, then you can't be in the club, or we need to put you on probation or in some way. And you had this totally different way of looking at it from the bounded set and the centered set that celebrates progress. And you started it off using your CrossFit experience. And if you turn to the left or the right, you're going to see the earrings and kind of you don't really see the tats, but there you go. So this is a non-traditional guy who's able to do some really amazing, I'll just call it humanitarian work, serving other people that God loves and we love and you love. So please take us behind the talk.
Yeah. So the talk isn't live yet. The video is not up yet, but because it's so recent, just like a week and a half ago. I mean, it's fresh. One of the cool things about kind of what I talked about is how we often pass judgment on people before we ever get to know their stories. And I mean, I think we've all been there. We can all probably remember a time where someone thought something about us far before they ever really got to know us. And I just talk about how our communities are very influenced by this reality. Our ways of organizing and structuring, not just the church, but politics and so many other places, I think have worked against what we would hope for, in that we tend to organize around what divides us instead of organizing around maybe the goal that we're moving toward. And so the bounded set is simply the idea that some communities place a lot, and I would even say most communities place a lot of their energy on defining and maintaining the boundary, who's in and who's out. And they make it clear to the community that's in who's out, and they make it clear to outsiders that they're out. And so I talked about centered set being the idea that what if we focused all of our energy on defining a central value that we're moving toward, but then also gauging progress based on movement. Like, you could be really far away from the center. You could look very different than me on any number of political issues, any number of religious, doctrines. But we could still be moving toward the same center, even if we're at different paces or at different places. And so I think it's a liberating way of organizing as we see the divisions in our world right now in a number of places. And so I'm hopeful that the idea might be encouraging to those who work in communities in any leadership context and are trying to look for a way to unite people. Yeah.
So, and in, the word that really comes to mind for me is this whole postmodern word. And it was a great talk to really, I just have a lot of respect for people who are coming from a faith community that come onto the red carpet of the TED stage and really land a message that's going to resonate with everybody, make everybody feel safe, welcome, valued, respected, and really, I mean, you said it so well. So are we focused on the boundary, or are we focused on the progress towards the center? And now, great metaphor. Because you're working out, anybody that's connected to you on Facebook, they're seeing you, literally pumping. I mean, you're lifted, you're doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and this was brilliant. So anyone listening, this little teaching point when you're getting your talk accepted and when you're refining your talk, if you can kind of be the learner in your own story, not the hero, not the person that's got it all together, but just like you were. I mean, you had some pretty significant weight loss. You showed up. You put your man pants on. You went to the CrossFit, which is something I haven't done yet because I'm still scared to go to a CrossFit. And you
could do it. You could do it.
You were so out of shape, yet you walked in there. Yep. And there were so many things you couldn't do that you can do now. So we're watching you and we're like, this guy's obviously got it together. This guy's obviously can do everything now, but you take us back to the time and you showed social proof and you had your trainer who it was just it was like a pull-up or something like that. And she was cheering we heard this like eruption and from your trainer. And then she kind of forgot what she was doing on the video and she hit the off button because she was so stoked for you. And it was just such a great story. Take us to that moment and tell us why it worked.
What's so great is like, I used that moment, but I think in CrossFit, I've had many of those moments. And the moment I'm referencing is that, when you come into CrossFit, it's pretty intimidating, especially I was 275 pounds when I started CrossFit. And so, for me, just getting through a workout's very, very hard at that point. You're carrying a lot of extra weight around. You're not necessarily cardiovascularly where you need to be to get through a workout. And you got people next to you that are called like fire breathers is what the CrossFit community calls them. And so we have a few of those in our gym and they're flying through the workout. They're just going. And you're just like, it can feel like I'm so far away from the center, if you want to use that, or if it's a bounded set, it can feel like I'm an outsider. They're an insider. I don't belong here. And one of the cool things that CrossFit Gamma, the gym I go to in Hershey, one of the things that's so cool about them is that they really do try to say, no matter where you're at fitness level wise, you belong. We're moving toward the center, and the center is fitness and health. And so I just thought this was such a great opportunity to share my experience with, my first week in CrossFit. If it would have been a bounded set, I would not have gone back. I wouldn't have gone back because I would have felt like I didn't belong there. I think what I experienced was coaches who came alongside me, encouraged me, you got this. Here's how to scale that movement because you don't have it yet. And it's going to be a while till you get it. And that's okay. And like just encouraging me that like, you're not them yet. They've been doing this for years and it's going to take time to get there. And it's so cool now to even see people walk in off the street where I was back then. And to be that encouraging force for them to be like, you got this, you can do this, So I talked about Coach Emma and how she helped me get my first pull up. And I got my first pull up and she's cheering and comes up and gives me a high five, shuts the video off, comes up, gives me a high five. And one of the crazy things is like Coach Emma can do multiple pull ups. She can even do a very complicated movement called muscle up. I would call her a fire breather. So what's crazy is what does it look like when someone who's that much closer to the center celebrates the movement of someone else as they begin to even take small steps toward the center, even though there might be a really big gap between them and the other person. And so you think about applying that to politics. I think about gun control. You might be like, we should ban all assault rifles, right? But then, and that might be your personal conviction and you have really good reasoning for that conviction. But then there might be someone else who's like, I'm not about that, but you might be able to connect with them on, hey, maybe we need better background checks than what we currently have. And actually connecting in that instead of allowing the two differences to be a difference. You're actually, both of you are moving closer to a safer, way of handling guns. That's one example. I mean, in religion, I could think of 100 examples. We're so divided in dogma and doctrine, and we have so many differences and approaches. And so I think the beauty is to see someone guide someone else is what I guess I'm saying. I think that it allows for guiding the centered set to us.
Justin, you're talking about doing a pull up or a power up or some of these things. I'm just thinking, I mean, we don't want to make this too, religious or whatever on the podcast, but this is your calling. This is your work. Yeah. This is, you're planting churches and you're doing this to try to help people take little pull ups closer to, we'll just say the higher power in this podcast. I'm wondering what are some little pull up steps that really aren't little, but they're absolutely huge. Is it connecting and realizing that there is a higher power? Is it forgiving somebody that did? I mean, what would be some examples that you've seen?
Oh, so many.
How do you guide people without having to swallow the whole thing that people aren't ready for yet? It's just really profound.
Yeah. Well, I think what's fascinating is Jesus meets people where they're at. And so I'll use Jesus as an example, but I mean, and certainly you can apply this to other faith communities. But for me, I look at the life of Jesus and I see someone who meets with a tax collector and says, let's go have a meal together, in a culture in which no one was having a meal together with tax collectors. And so the two greatest commandments are love God and love your neighbor. So for me, I look at it and I say, okay, how can I help people and guide people toward a better understanding of what it looks like to love their neighbor? And also a more expansive understanding of who their neighbor is. Some people are like, my neighbor is just the people in my life that I like. And Jesus seems to shatter that.
Only the people that I like or vote with or whatever.
In traffic too. I think it's the dude who flips you off in traffic too. He's your neighbor too. And it might be really hard to love him. And so when I hear stories in our community about people, there was actually a person who told me that he was stopped at a red light and the guy behind him started honking and cursing him out, had his head out the window, yelling at him. And this particular person is like, in a past life, I would have handled that so much differently. I took a breath and we were going through a series at the time called Everybody Always. And we were just talking about how we are a church about everybody always. And we want to be people who are about everybody always. And he just sat there and he's like, really, God, everybody always, even this guy. But it's even the fact that he thought that way, to me, is a huge step, a huge step forward. And it's actually, I would say, a step out of bounded set, because bounded set would say, this guy's cursing at me. He's not part of my tribe. He's not on the inside. He's on the outside. I'm inside. He's outside. And it begins to other somebody instead of actually find a way to connect with them. And so the way he handled that situation was very different than the way he might have a different way. I think of people who have forgiven people. I think of one story of somebody I know who's an atheist, doesn't believe in God, but told me they started praying. And I was like, that's awesome.
How does that work? Wow.
Well, and for them, they're just like, I just feel better. It works. It's helping me. And I'm like, that's awesome. I think God can work with that. I think God can meet you in that place and continue to guide you. And so we celebrate any movement toward the center. It's not as much about, for me, about statements as about movement. And I think a lot of churches can make statements, but they don't have a whole lot of movement. And so we want to be a church that's about movement toward the center.
Well, we've been enjoying this talk with Justin Douglas. His talk is called Beyond Boundaries, Bounded Set and Centered Set, and it is a recent talk, so it may be a little while until we are able to put that on our website. I'm going to tell you where you can go to find out about that in just a moment. But first, we're going to come back in just a moment for the Blitz Round. Hey, Talk Universe. I hope you've been enjoying today's episode with today's guest. But you know what? Many people want more than that. Many people that listen to Be the Talk actually want to give a talk. And if that's you, you're not alone. Listen to the rest of this podcast. At the end, I'll have a free resource for you just for listening. And we're back with the Blitz Round with Justin Douglas. We're going to take a few minutes here and go behind the talk in the process of preparing and performing, for all purposes, the talk. I'm going to ask him a series of either or questions to that end. Justin, are you ready?
I am.
All right.
Let's do it.
First question. Were you invited to speak or did you apply?
I applied.
All right. Are you a memorizer, an improviser, or a blender?
Blender.
How does that serve you?
Well, on a Sunday morning, I would be an improviser. I have like an anchor method. I have particular topics. But then for this, I memorized more than I would typically memorize. And it actually served me really well because there were some technological issues that day, and the teleprompter that we had planned to work was not working. And I even had to have my coach run my slides. So that's actually a good thing if you're considering doing a TED Talk, and have a backup plan, because I didn't going in, and I was creating one on the fly. The backup plan for me was that the clicker wasn't working, or at least wasn't working as well as it should. And so I was able to have my coach back there running the slides, because she had seen my presentation so many times that she knew where the slide clicks were. So
I'm going to break the fourth wall, because I was somewhat involved in a couple days before this was the event that I actually emceed the first part of. So, there was like a 40% clicker fail rate that day. Bad. And you were one of the have-nots, unfortunately. So
I saw that happening, because I was in this first part of the second group, and I was just like, I'm not going to be able to hold a clicker. And my slides were very motion graphic heavy. And I knew that if it wasn't moving, I wasn't going to be able to move on to the next point. And I knew it was just going to be very glitchy. And so I just went up to Maddie, my coach, and was like, hey, what do you think about running my slides? You know where everything is. And then the teleprompter, I was just like, the other person can run the teleprompter. And even then the teleprompter didn't work. So I'm glad I memorized it. And so I would encourage people, I practiced it so many times too. I think all of that is really, really good.
Yeah. Well, and so, those of you, listening to this and you're prepping on your talk, what will you do when the clicker fails? You can get good save from Justin. He had his coach in the room. It's good to have a coach. It's good to hire a coach. Yeah. Have them in the room if you can. And then sometimes that doesn't happen, but have some kind of a backup plan, because the clicker situation is a difficult situation. All right. What is a tip, tool, or technique that helped you?
That's good. I think I'll just go to my anchor method. I have anchors. So like I had like 5 anchors in my head, okay, if I get lost, I know what the next anchor is and I can get there. And that's kind of a tip or tool that I would encourage people to kind of think of, like, you're dropping anchors for each section, or you could call them chapters, whatever you want to say. So if you're losing your space in a chapter and you're not sure how to wrap it, you could jump to the next chapter and still feel like you're moving forward.
My last question, this is the cut for time question. What was the most painful part of your talk that you had to cut out?
Another personal story that I probably would have shared. Yeah.
Those are hard to cut out.
Yeah.
But it's worth it. It was a great talk. We've been enjoying our conversation today with Justin Douglas. His talk is called Beyond Boundaries, Bounded Set and Centered Set. And no matter if you are a political zealot, if you are a very religious person, if you are a very opinionated person, if you are a very tribal person, as we all are, this is so powerful because it gets us out of binary thinking towards connecting and celebrating small wins with people. You can find out more about Justin over at his web site. It's called PastorJustinDouglas.com, PastorJustinDouglas.com. And actually, you want to find out, listen to some of his content on TheBridgeOnline.com. He does have some of his talks up there from his organization. And we're going to be back in just a moment with Justin Douglas and the final word of advice. Hey, Talk Universe, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And if you want to give the talk to change the world, but you don't know how or even where to start, no problem at all. Go to BeTheTalk.com/get accepted for my new 5-day email course that'll show you how. Absolutely free. Just go to BeTheTalk.com/get accepted. And we're back. It is time for the final word of advice for Talk Universe.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about doing a TED Talk, I think the word of advice I would have is really memorize the takeoff and the landing. A lot of people will stutter in the takeoff and you don't get people's confidence in you, and they're more worried about you than listening to the content. And I think a lot of people circle the landing strip a lot of times and don't know how to land the plane. And so memorize that landing. You do both those and you're going to do well.
All right, Talk Universe, land the plane. Justin, thanks so much for joining me today and carving out some time to share your wisdom with Talk Universe.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Be the Talk. For tips and resources to help you change the world, go to BeTheTalk.com. See you tomorrow.